On the morning of November 8, 2001, 53-year-old Donna O'Steen was found murdered inside her home in Seattle. She had been bound with duct tape and stabbed multiple times. There were signs of robbery, but it wasn't clear if that was the real motive. There were no signs of forced entry, only a few random items were missing, and the killer had brought their own knife and duct tape. That raised a troubling question. Had someone wanted Donna dead, but her family and friends couldn't think of a single person who would want to hurt her? She had no enemies, no history of conflict, and no known threats. More than 2 decades later, her murder remains unsolved, and her family is still asking the same question. Who would want to kill Donna O'Steen? Hey everyone, welcome back to Detective Perspective. My name is Derrick Levasseur. I'm a licensed private investigator and former police detective. Each week I'll be covering an unsolved case in story format. I'll then give you my perspective on the investigation and provide contact information for the individuals or organizations connected to the case so that if you have any tips, you can contact them directly and maybe you can help solve a case. So if you're someone who's interested in true crime, specifically unsolved cases, and you would like to hear my opinion on those investigations, please consider subscribing whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you use. Okay, couple house cleaning things before we hop into this week's episode. First off, welcome to Derrick's Hat here. If you're joining me on YouTube, you're welcome. You get to see this all episode. Congrats to you. The second thing, which is a major announcement for those of you who follow my other endeavors, whether it's Crime Weekly or Criminal Coffee, Criminal Coffee is now coming out with our own flavored coffee. This is a first for us where we're going to be carrying it consistently. We did do a peppermint bark for Christmas, but now if you look on the table right here, you can see it. I'll hold them up for you real quick. My hand may focus on this. Hopefully it does. We have our hazelnut. There it is right there if you're watching on YouTube. And we also have our French vanilla. And you can see that right there. If it zooms in, boom, there it goes. French vanilla. Shout out to Ashley, my assistant. She actually designed the cover art for this. It looks amazing. Great job, Ashley. And the flavor is incredible. We blind taste tested multiple flavors. Both myself and my co-host from Crime Weekly, Stephanie Harlow, we both choose the same two as our favorite. We were going to do one, but we liked them both equally. So we said, F it, we're just going to put them both out there. It's a little bit more expense to us to produce the bags and obviously roast 2 different coffees because they can't be roasted in the same vat. It basically has to be cleaned out because you don't want to cross-contaminate flavors. So we're still doing it. We think they're both going to be a huge hit. And if you would like to support what we're doing over there, just head on over to criminalcoffeeco.com. This episode is probably going to come out a day or 2 before the coffee is released. It's probably going to be released Friday night at midnight. So if this episode is out before that, just stand by Friday night at midnight. You can go check out the coffee. It's here. I would greatly appreciate it. Okay, so now as far as the case we're talking about, Donna O'Steen, I've already done some research on this. I was Google mapping the area right before hitting record here again because I was trying to see if there was anything that I missed the first time I went through all the information. And candidly, it's pretty much what I thought the first time I kind of observed it and roamed around the area via Google Maps. Nothing has really stuck out to me that would say, okay, I missed that the first time, I need to include it. But I'm going to go over all the facts. I want to talk about everything in this case. There are some people working this case, investigators, etc. Some say it was a robbery gone wrong. Some believe it was a targeted attack that was staged to look like a robbery. I'm torn, and I'll save my final thoughts for the perspective, but I don't think it's clear cut either way. I do believe that this person probably was familiar with Donna and maybe her kind of her routine each day. But as far as whether there was something more sinister going on here, as far as the motive behind it, I don't really know. So I'm looking forward to getting your opinions on this case. So with that out of the way, let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into this week's case. Donna Sue Guernsey was born on December 2, 1947 in Washington State. She grew up on Mercer Island with her parents Barbara and Harold, her sister Shirley, and her brother Gary. She was described as resourceful, honest, and strong, someone who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. But Donna wasn't confrontational. She didn't have enemies, and there were no reports of any violent or unstable relationships in her past. She was well liked by everyone who knew her. In February of 1978, Donna married Jim O'Steen, an architect. They shared a love for sailing and even took their 37-foot boat, the Renaissance, all the way to the South Pacific. Unfortunately, 5 years into the marriage, Jim passed away due to a health issue. A few years later, Donna started dating Richard Haney. They eventually got married, though she still continued using the last name O'Steen. Together, they had 2 children, a son Kalen and a daughter Morgan. They also ran a marine insurance agency together. The family settled in Seattle's Ballard neighborhood, an area often described as safe. The house was located at 6505 37th Avenue Northwest on a bluff overlooking Shills Hole Bay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I've been studying the Google Maps for this area. You can see it right here on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. The house is kind of tucked away, and it's located on the corner of 65th Court where it meets 37th Avenue. And it's secluded. I mean, the whole neighborhood as a whole is pretty condensed. It's pretty houses right on top of each other. I wouldn't say they're all spread out. There's a lot of people in a very small area. But if you click even further on this particular area, you can look at the street view, which I did here as well, and you can see it on the screen. And we're going to talk more about this photo, this particular image. We're going to get into some more details that I'm going to come back to. But the photo itself, you can see the entry to the house, you can see the detached garage, and you can also see a gate in the back there where it leads down to the railroad tracks over the bluff. So those are areas you definitely want to keep in mind as we start to talk about the case, especially when I get into the area where we talk about how one of the offenders or the offender escaped right while family members and friends were in the area, how they would have gotten out of there without being seen. That gate that we see in the back of the yard there, that could be your answer. But we're going to dive more into it. So by the fall of 2001, Richard and Donna were still running the insurance agency together. Donna worked part-time so she could take care of the children, volunteer in the classrooms, and stay involved with the PTA. On the morning of November 8, 2001, Richard left for work around 7:30 a.m. A short time later, their son left for middle school, and at approximately 7:45 a.m., Donna dropped Morgan off at a before-school piano lesson. Then she returned home to make her lunch, something she did most mornings. At around 8:25 a.m. or 8:30 a.m., and I say both times because sources vary depending on where you look, Donna spoke to her sister Shirley on the phone. The call didn't last long, but Donna did say that she was in a bad mood. And it's important to note that this was the last time anyone is known to have spoken with Donna. At 8:45, Donna was supposed to pick Morgan up and drive her to school, but when the lesson ended, Donna wasn't there, which was completely unlike her. Morgan waited, and when her mom still hadn't arrived by 9:30, her piano teacher, Virginia, decided to drive her home. When they pulled up to the house, they saw Donna's car parked in the driveway. Morgan got out of the car and tried all 3 doors located on the main floor, but they were all locked, and that's important to remember. She told Virginia that the doors were locked, but she could get inside using a hidden key. So then they walked into the garage and they grabbed the hidden key. Morgan used it to unlock the front door, but it only opened a few inches, and that was because the safety latch had been fastened from the inside. This surprised Morgan, and she told Virginia that her family, quote, never used that lock. They called out to Donna through the small opening, but no one answered. Virginia said that she had a bad feeling and told Morgan they needed to look for help. They went next door and located a landscaper who was about to start cutting some trees. And in less than 5 minutes, all 3 individuals returned back to the house. That's when they noticed that something had changed. The side door on the deck off the kitchen, which had been closed and locked just minutes earlier, was now open. The landscaper told Morgan and Virginia to wait by the entrance while he stepped inside alone. Later, he told Seattle Weekly that as soon as he walked in, he was, quote, terrified. He said the hairs on the back of his neck stood up and he, quote, knew there was something very wrong. He observed 2 small spots of blood on the middle steps, each about the size of a dog's paw. Now, at first, he thought it was makeup, but then he wondered if it was a dog, Why was it only on 2 steps? As he reached the top of the stairs, he saw signs of a disturbance. The television had been knocked over and it was lying on its side. Understandably, he was worried that someone might still be in the house, so he ran to get a neighbor that he had spoken to earlier. The two returned only moments later and went back upstairs together. And they didn't get far, just inside the primary bedroom, but what they saw confirmed their worst fears. Donna's jewelry box had been ransacked. The drawers were pulled out and contents had been dumped across the bed, and pieces of costume jewelry were scattered everywhere. At that point, Virginia came upstairs and called 911 from her cell phone. Then she stepped fully into the primary bedroom, looked around, and saw something in a narrow passage between the bed and the bathroom. It was Donna. We have a lot more to talk about. We're going to cover the whole crime scene. Let's take our first break. We'll be right back. Your nighttime bedroom temperature has a huge impact on your sleep quality. If you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Miracle Made bed sheets are inspired by NASA and use silver-infused fabrics that are temperature regulating so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. Traditional bed sheets can harbor more bacteria than a toilet seat. It can lead to acne, allergies, and stuffy noses, and overall I think we can agree it's just gross. Miracle Made offers a whole line of self-cleaning antibacterial bedding such as sheets, pillowcases, and comforters that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth and require up to 3 times less cleaning. So yes, these sheets are temperature regulating, self-cleaning, and most importantly, extremely comfortable, but without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and feel just as nice, if not nicer, than some sheets that I've slept on in 5-star hotels. And I've been using these sheets for over a year now. With the exception of changing them out, maybe throwing them in the laundry and having to throw some other sheets on, I've been sleeping with them every night, and even if Miracle Made was no longer a sponsor of this channel, I'd still be using their sheets. So go to trymiracle.com/detective to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use my promo code DETECTIVE at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. And Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. So upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made by going to trymiracle.com/detective and use code DETECTIVE to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40%. Again, that's trymiracle.com/detective, code DETECTIVE to treat yourself. Thank you to Miracle Made for sponsoring this episode. All right, so we're back, and before break, I mentioned that Virginia had come upstairs, initially called 911 from her cell phone, then proceeded to enter the bedroom, and as she looked around, she looked between the bed and the bathroom, and she saw Donna on the floor. So let's describe that a little bit more about Donna's specifically and also the room. So Donna was laying chest down, her face was turned toward the wall, her hands were bound behind her back with duct tape. She was fully clothed, but she was covered in blood. Understandably, at that point, Virginia and the others rushed out of the house. They didn't know if the offender was still inside. So she ended the call with 911 and then called Richard at work. She told him that Donna was seriously injured, possibly dead, and that he needed to come home immediately. So at that point, he rushed back to the house. When police arrived, they began examining the scene. According to Seattle Weekly, there were no signs of forced entry, but the phone line had been cut and the family's dogs were found, quote, confined on the first floor. Inside the primary bedroom upstairs, officers confirmed what Virginia had feared. Donna was deceased. She had been stabbed multiple times, with injuries stretching from her neck to her abdomen. An autopsy later determined that she had been stabbed 13 times. It is important to note that there were no signs of sexual assault. Officers looked closely around the primary bedroom, and there were 2 holes in the drywall, likely made by Donna kicking during her attack. There was a large pool of blood beneath her body and spatter or smears in the hallway and the bathroom. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that there were also smears from where the killer had leaned against the window frames, looking out in different directions, and another smear on the bedroom door frame as well. So what does this mean? Well, when we go back to how we got here, Morgan coming home unexpectedly and trying all 3 main doors, and then using a key to open the door a little bit but not being able to get inside because of the lock that had been latched. the offender was still in the house. And at that point, they're probably looking out the window to see how they can get out of there without being seen or apprehended. So when Morgan and Virginia leave, that's when the person makes their escape. But more than likely, as Morgan and Virginia are knocking on the doors, calling out for Donna, the offender is looking out the windows to see who's out there, but also looking out the bedroom door to see if anybody's coming up the stairs. So it's a really scary thought to envision. And as hard as this is to say, I am glad that Morgan and Virginia weren't allowed inside at that point, had to make basically a detour to go get someone else, because I do believe if somehow that latch hadn't been on that door and Morgan and Virginia had gone inside, I don't think they would have survived. I think at that point, the offender would have felt like they were cornered and more than likely would have killed Morgan and Virginia just to get out of there without being seen. So with a violent offender possibly still in the area, police blocked off the neighborhood and brought in bloodhounds to search escape routes. But according to Westside Seattle, the dogs came up empty and there was no sign of the killer. Detectives then turned their attention back to the crime scene, and at first glance, it looked like a robbery gone wrong, especially with the primary bedroom being ransacked. But when they looked a little bit closer, that theory didn't seem as strong. You see, only a few items had been taken, and the ones that were missing didn't make much sense. Several valuable items had been left behind, while others that were worth far less were gone. So what were these missing items? Let's start with the missing ones, which included a half-gallon pickle jar filled with nickels, around 18 pounds in total, a small child-sized lavender combination lock safe, and a Black Outdoors brand backpack. Also gone was a bank bag marked with possibly US currency $50 and a silver semicircle bracelet with horses running head to tail. Several pieces of sentimental jewelry were also missing, including Donna's wedding ring from her first marriage, a gold band with a small diamond, her wedding ring from Richard, and her grandmother's wedding ring as well. So this is the part where, for me, law enforcement says, items of value that were much more valuable weren't taken, but these items were. If you're in a hurry and then you have to cut it short because someone arrives back at the property, you don't know how valuable those items are at the time, and they're small, so they can be stuck in your pocket. So this to me is a little contradictory, and I don't necessarily think these items being taken suggest that it doesn't align with the robbery. I think it does. But I want to hear your opinions on that. When you hear the items that I just mentioned, do you think that that would support a robbery? Me personally, small, easy to carry, easy to get rid of. You can melt them down. You can bring them to a pawn shop. I think that's exactly what a robber would be looking to do, especially in a hurry. But don't let me skew your judgment here. Don't let me influence you. Pause the video, pause the audio. Let me know what you think. So now let's talk about several items that hadn't been touched despite their value. According to the Seattle PI, that included a stack of silver dollars, a high-end Omega watch, a strand of pearls, and the emerald ring Donna was still wearing on her finger. So I get it. These things are very expensive. They are, especially when you think about the silver dollars and the Omega watch. Depending on what Omega watch it is, I'm a big watch guy, could be very expensive. But again, we're trying to put ourselves in the mind of the killer, and they may have had intentions to take items like that as well. But when multiple people show up to the house, at that point, it's a grab. You just grab whatever you can, whatever's in arm's reach. But the number one priority at that point is to get out of there without being caught. So yes, they may have had intentions to take those items. They may have even seen them. But when you're thinking about running out of there, you're not going to be able to carry out a bunch of silver dollars. You may stuff a couple in your pocket, but overall, it's survival at this point. You're just trying to get out of there as fast as possible, and you may miss some expensive items. That happens all the time. But again, I want to hear your thoughts. The detectives investigating Donna's murder felt like there was also something else besides the items that were taken and not taken that didn't quite fit the robbery gone wrong narrative. You see, the killer had brought their own knife and duct tape, which meant that they came prepared. And this information raised another possibility. If the killer had come prepared, was this a targeted attack? And if it was, who would want to do something like this to Donna, and why? And I'll push back again here because I'm trying to remain as objective as possible while also relaying the facts to you. To me, yes, I do agree. The preparation here does indicate that there might have been something going on. Was this a targeted attack where they staged it to look like a robbery? But I could also make an argument that this person had done some counter surveillance, knew the house they were going to go into, and knew there was a strong possibility that Donna was there alone. Maybe they wanted that to be the case. And so preparing for that, knowing that they would have to act fast once they were inside, they brought duct tape and a knife with them so they would have that at their disposal. It could have still been a premeditated robbery or a premeditated robbery and murder. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was anything more than that. It could have just been that Donna lived in the home and they knew that they were going to have to take her out. To me, this information doesn't automatically scream this was a targeted attack and the robbery was a distraction. And normally I would save what I'm going to say next until the perspective, but I want to give you a little peek into my mindset right now. We know that Donna was scheduled to pick up Morgan at 8:45 a.m. and she never showed up. And she last talked to her sister around 8:25, 8:30. So my belief is that the attack happened somewhere in that window. So even if we push it to 8:45 when the attack happened, which wouldn't make a lot of sense because Donna would have already left to go pick Morgan up. But let's just say, for the sake of this argument, the attack happens at 8:45 and the intent behind this whole thing is to kill Donna. You could kill her and still get out of there within 15 minutes. And yet Morgan and Virginia show up after 9:30 and the killer is still inside. To me, that indicates that the killer was there for more than just Donna. Yes, it's a possibility that when Morgan and Virginia arrived, that's when the killer stabbed Donna because they realized they weren't going to have time to do whatever else they wanted to do, whether that was just continue the robbery or carry out a sexual assault, whatever it might be. They were rushed. They had to ramp up what they were doing and expedite whatever they were trying to carry out, and they may not have got to complete everything they wanted to do. But again, there was no sign of sexual assault and there were items taken, and we're talking after 9:30 a.m. So they were there for a while, and you have to ask yourself why. Why were they there so long? Were they torturing Donna or were they there for the robbery as well? We may never have that answer unless we catch this person, but I do think the fact that they were there so long does give some indication that they were there for more than just Donna. So that's my take on it. Again, I would usually save it for the perspective, but I think it fits better right here. But understandably, detectives have to vet every theory, as they should, and so they wanted to look into the idea that the robbery was a farce. It was just something to throw them off, and they thought that there might be someone who wanted to see Donna dead. So naturally, detectives immediately looked at her husband, Richard. They spoke with him that same day, and he explained that after he left work around 7:30 a.m., he had been at the office when Virginia called, and he was completely shocked by Donna's murder and couldn't think of anyone who would want to hurt her. Now, Donna's friends and family later said the same thing. They didn't believe Richard had anything to do with Donna's death. And investigators also interviewed Donna's friends and family, and they all essentially said the same thing. They had nothing but kind words for her and couldn't think of anyone who would want to harm her. According to the Seattle PI, detectives asked if either Richard or Donna had been having affairs or if anyone had been bothering Donna lately. Richard said no to both. He told them that between running a business, parenting 2 kids, and living and working together, they didn't have much time to lead secret lives. And if someone had been bothering Donna, she would have definitely told him, but she never mentioned anything. Now, detectives were able to confirm Richard's alibi. He was at work during the estimated window of time when Donna was killed, so that ruled him out as the killer, but it didn't fully clear him of any possible involvement, so detectives did keep an eye on him. Detectives learned that behind the property, down the bluff, were railroad tracks, and some neighbors told police that those tracks attracted transients, though they couldn't recall any serious crimes happening nearby, not even something like a car theft. And if we pull back up the photo here of the overview, you can see their property, you can see where Donna lived, and you can see the tracks running right behind it. There's not a lot behind there. I will say, if we pull up the street view again, what a beautiful view you have from their house. You can see the water, because you kind of have that drop off behind it. So it's a really attractive view, but again, if someone was on those tracks and wanted to gain access to her property without coming in from the street where someone might see them, they could have come down those tracks, come up that bluff, and gone right through that gate. Now, I don't know if there was a lock on that gate that would prevent someone from coming inside, but without that information, I'm going to assume that you did have access from there. And if you had access and I'm trying to commit a crime without being seen, that would be the way I'm coming in. Detectives also learned about a man who lived in what they described as a, quote, ramshackle cabin at the foot of the bluff. His home was searched and he was brought in for questioning, but there was nothing tying him to Donna's murder, so he was let go. Another tip came in about a transient man who had allegedly bragged at a local tavern that he had killed a woman. So detectives tracked him down and questioned him, but ultimately ruled him out as well. They then circled back to Richard, who remained fully cooperative. He later told the Seattle PI that he was willing to do anything to help the investigation. He went through hours of interrogation, gave blood samples, and agreed to a polygraph, and in the end, according to him, detectives told him he was no longer a suspect. And I will say, as I'm sitting here right now, based on the statements that I've read, that statement is accurate. I do not think that detectives are considering him any longer. And I did have the opportunity to watch a couple video interviews with him that were more recent. And you can't judge a book by its cover, but just from me, he passed the vibe check. He seemed authentic. They even showed his office where he has a ton of information and articles and investigations and research that he's done. He has photos of the sketches that were done of the individuals who were possibly, or the individual, I should say, that was possibly involved in this crime. So he seems to be invested. And when he's talking, there's something genuine about his hurt. And again, that's just a gut feeling. I can't give you anything that's substantive to say 100% that's the case, but I believed him. And if you go watch those video interviews, I think you'll come to the same conclusion. Again, he could be a good actor, but doing this a while, being able to read people pretty well, I'm buying what he's selling. That's my take on it. So we have those persons of interest kind of out of the way. They've been talked to. And within days of Donna's murder, the investigation stalled. And Donna's family believes that that's because law enforcement was focused on a different case. Just a few weeks earlier, Assistant U.S. Attorney Thomas Wales had been shot and killed in a Seattle home. According to Donna's sister Shirley, the difference in response was obvious. She said that 4 or 5 FBI agents and a Seattle detective were assigned to Tom's case, while just one Seattle detective was assigned to Donna's. And that detective had between 10 and 20 other cases at the same time. And here's the thing, Shirley wasn't wrong. Seattle Magazine later reported that federal agents from the FBI, the ATF, and Seattle PD were immediately assigned to Tom's case. A $1 million reward was offered, and the case received Bureau Major Case status. And just for context, that's the same classification given to the Unabomber investigation. At the time, fewer than 200 cases in FBI history had ever received that designation. So yes, Tom's case was receiving a lot of attention from both law enforcement and the media, but despite all of that, his murder remains unsolved to this day, just like Donna's. And I do want to say here, I'm not going to get too into Tom's case because we were starting to research it. I was starting to look into it, look at some of the information that's been out there publicly. It's a fascinating case, and we're probably going to cover it here down the road on Detective Perspective. So be on the lookout for that one. It's a good case to talk about. So while the FBI and the Seattle police were investigating Tom's murder on the same level as the Unabomber case, Donna O'Steen's murder was quietly falling through the cracks. 6 months after her death, Richard spoke to the Seattle PI. He said he continued checking in with detectives because he didn't want Donna's case to get pushed aside or forgotten. He told the paper, quote, "I don't ever want Donna's case to be pushed to the side of a desk." So here's another small example where Richard's not fitting the mold of someone who's got something to hide. We have seen cases where that's what is happening, and those people normally want the case to be forgotten about. They want it to be filed away. And Richard's kind of the leader here. He's trying to rejuvenate the case. He's trying to make sure that people don't forget about it. And if he was somehow involved, I don't think that's what he would be doing. And again, during this interview where he made this statement about having her case pushed to the side of a desk, Richard also said that he still couldn't think of anyone who would want to hurt Donna. However, he believed the killer had to be someone Donna knew, someone she would willingly let into the house. He suspected it was a friend or at least someone she had met before. He said, quote, "I think when we find this person, it's going to shock us." And respectfully, I have to disagree with Richard here. Yes, it's absolutely possible what he's saying. It's also possible that this person was a neighbor, a construction worker, a landscaper, or someone just traveling through the neighborhood and had noticed on multiple occasions that Donna was in this big house alone and felt like that she was a good victim of opportunity where they could get in, get what they wanted, and then get out. So they may have had a familiarity with her. They may have said hello once or twice. But when we do find this person, hopefully we do, it may be that they just had seen her once or twice and they approached the door, presented themselves as a friendly, maybe somebody who is looking for directions or trying to sell something. And unfortunately, Donna opened the door and they forced themselves inside. It doesn't mean that they were let inside. All she had to do was crack that door open and they could have easily pushed their way inside. So I understand where Richard's coming from. It's very possible that when we find this person, they will be someone close to Donna or her family. It's also just as likely that this will be someone no one has ever seen or heard of before. But that wasn't the only theory that Richard had. He also wondered if it could have been another parent that Donna had met through their children's sports or someone she encountered at a PTA meeting or a Ballard community event. He said, quote, "Maybe it was someone verging on a stalker who finally got up the courage to come to the house. Donna was a very attractive woman." This is also possible. Every theory is on the table right now. You can't really rule anything out with the limited information that we have. There's a reason that all of these years have gone by and we still haven't found this person. It could be because they just got lucky and they didn't leave behind the right piece of evidence. It could also be that they have zero ties to Donna, her friends, or family. There might be no connection. And those are, without a doubt, the hardest cases to solve. When this person is just a random individual who happened to come into the victim's life on that day, that's a difficult case for detectives to solve because there's no path to follow. There's no line to track. So I'm hoping that Richard's right. I'm hoping that this is someone who has a connection to Donna and we just have to find that missing piece of the puzzle. But the fact that we haven't solved it, that could indicate that this is someone that she had no previous connection with, which is why we're in the position we're in. And finally, Richard said that no matter who it was, Donna would have put up a fight unless she had been subdued before she was bound. He emphasized that Donna wasn't timid. She stood 5'6", weighed around 140 pounds, and was in good shape. He said, quote, "She was not a woman to be pushed around." As the years passed, Donna's case continued to stall and received very little media attention. In November of 2004, police shared new information with the Seattle PI. They said the investigation was still ongoing. However, some people connected to the case had been less cooperative than they'd hoped. A few refused to speak with investigators altogether, while others, quote, lawyered up or declined to provide DNA samples. And listen, I have mixed feelings on this. We know that sometimes when you're cooperative with law enforcement, it can hurt you, especially when they're looking for something to grab onto because they don't really have any strong leads. So there is some risk with going in and speaking to them and being candid, because if you just say something the wrong way, now you could be on their radar. But we don't know who these people are, and detectives didn't say who these individuals might be, but they made it clear that Richard was not one of them. He had done everything they asked and continued to cooperate fully with the investigation. We're going to take our last break and we'll be right back. Most of you guys know me by now. I'm a huge animal lover, and although I don't currently own a cat, I've always loved them. I grew up around them in my entire life. Now we've transitioned to dogs, and dogs and cats don't necessarily mix. You know how that goes. And it's a little funny to be promoting a cat food when I don't actually have a cat right now. But my sister Megan, she has 2 cats, and she's raved about the cat food from Smalls. And that's a big endorsement because she doesn't have children. Her cats are her children. So for her to be giving them this food, that's a huge endorsement. So if your cat has digestive issues, throwing up their food, or is just simply in need of a diet upgrade, Smalls is the cat food for you. Smalls cat food is protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients you'll find right in your fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. That's why Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. To get 35% off plus an additional 50% off your first order, head over to smalls.com and use my promo code DETECTIVE for a limited time only. And if you don't want to take my word or my sister's word for it, here's a review from a Smalls customer. Her name's Jennifer, and she says, quote, "After every feeding, he gets this burst of energy and starts running around the house. And his fur is softer and more vibrant with higher contrast. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend anything else." Plus, I really respect that Smalls works with the Humane Society. They've donated over $1 million worth of food to help cats through the Humane Society, and they even give you a chance to donate at checkout. So whether you donate $5 for a flea and tick medication or $7 for vaccines, you have the option to do that as you check out, as you order your food. So big shout out to my niece and nephew, Romeo and Juliet. Yes, that is my sister's cats. We're not going to talk about it. Just go with me on this. They have softer, shinier coats. Their litter boxes are less stinky, and they also maintain a healthier weight. All things that I want for my lovely niece and nephew. So what are you waiting for? Give your cat the food they deserve. For a limited time only, because you're a Detective Perspective listener or viewer, you can get 35% off Smalls plus an additional 50% off your first order by using my code DETECTIVE. That's an additional 50% off when you head to smalls.com and use promo code DETECTIVE. Again, that's promo code DETECTIVE for an additional 50% off your first order plus free shipping only at smalls.com. Okay, we're back. And that same month when law enforcement came out and said that there were people who were not cooperative and Richard was being fully cooperative, they also continued releasing new information, which included sketches of 2 persons of interest who were seen in the neighborhood on the day of Donna's murder. One man was described as a white male, possibly in his 30s or 40s, around 6 feet tall and weighing between 180 and 200 pounds. He had light brown or blonde hair in a box-style cut with no scruff on the neck, similar to a Dutch boy haircut. He may have had a mustache and possibly bad skin or acne. At the time he was seen by witnesses, he was wearing a white long-sleeve painter-style shirt, white painter pants, a white hard hat, and a see-through orange traffic vest. Now see, this is a perfect example right here where that outfit, that uniform, maybe because he was working in the area, which would have given him an opportunity to kind of scope the grounds. It also could have been a ruse, right? He could have been dressed like this to lower people's guard. He could have walked right up to Donna's house with his orange vest on. She looks out the window and sees this guy and thinks, oh, he might be here. He's a utility guy, or they're going to be, cutting off traffic in the area. So they want people to be aware of it. I need to get out of here soon to go pick up Morgan. So she opens the door thinking he's going to relay some information to her, and he gets the jump on her. It could be that simple. But there was also a second man, and he was described as a white male, around 40 years old, 6 feet tall with a medium build. He was dressed like a construction worker in clean clothing. So yeah, another person who could walk up to the house, and if you're looking outside and you're not on your guard, you may see this person and think, oh, they must be trying to tell me something. Maybe they're going to cut off the road, and maybe they want me to get my car out of here before they do so. So 2 different outfits, 2 different uniforms that may have had Donna look out the window and say, oh, it's someone just letting me know that there's going to be something going on in the area. And that's all it would take, because you open that door, and if the guy's a decent size, 6 feet, medium build, it's not going to take much for him to overpower her, especially if she's not expecting it. And I do want to say that regarding these 2 men, the police did later clarify that the men weren't necessarily suspects, just individuals they were hoping to identify. And that's part of the process, right? You want to find out who they are. You want to talk to them, see if they have a valid reason for being in that area. And if they don't, that's when you start to turn up the heat. But yeah, you just got to identify them first, and you can do a preliminary background and search. And if something doesn't line up, you bring them in and you press a little bit harder to see what they know. In addition to the descriptions of these 2 men, law enforcement also released replica photos of 2 pieces of jewelry stolen from Donna's home. It was the silver bracelet with the horses and a men's wedding ring. So that is also something that you want to take a look at. We'll have it up on the screen. But why they waited so long to release this information, I don't know. I know that Richard was outspoken about this. He was frustrated that it had taken so long to release this information publicly, and I completely agree with him. I don't understand the rationale behind it. The jewelry was taken. Yes, you would like to have some guilt knowledge if you find this person, if they identify specific things that weren't released to the public, you may be able to confirm their credibility. But after a couple years, at most 5 years, this is information you have to put out there, especially the descriptions of the jewelry, because you would want pawn shops to see this and you would want them to be on the lookout for this jewelry. So that way, if they happen to see someone bring it in, they can call you. But now this is 2004. We're talking 3 or 4 years. To me, that's still too long. I know I said 5, but yeah, maybe a year. And then you got to release the pictures of the jewelry. You want that out to as many people as possible. So if they see someone wearing it or someone trying to sell it, they can call you. If they don't know about it, they can't contact detectives. Unfortunately, even with the release of the sketches and the replica jewelry, the case continued to stall, and for years, there were no updates on Donna's case. Then in September of 2023, nearly 22 years after Donna's murder, the Seattle Police Department gave a brief update stating that the case was still open and under investigation, which, you know me, I'm pro-cop, but that means nothing, and it's basically just lip service. They're just basically saying, hey, we're still not going to tell you anything more than we want to share with you because it's open and it's quote-unquote active, and so therefore, we're not going to tell you anything. But here they even chose their words a little bit more carefully. They didn't use the word active. They said just under investigation. And under investigation is a pretty vague term, and I think it's pretty open to interpretation. So what that actually means, how much work they're actually doing, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it could be a lot. It could also be nothing. After law enforcement gave this very brief update, Donna's family also spoke to King 5 News. Her brother Gary shared that the police still weren't sure why Donna was killed. They didn't know if someone had come up from the train tracks and broken into her home, or if someone really did have a vendetta against her. At this point, they just had no clue what happened to her or why it was done. Either way, the family needed answers. Gary said, quote, "Hopefully justice will be served. That won't ever relieve the ache in our hearts for our sister that's gone." Richard agreed and said that he was still hopeful that someone would come forward. He added, quote, "It's tough to realize that this person killed your wife and he's out there free, running around." Unfortunately, that's the most recent update we have in this case. Donna's family continues to search for answers, and her killer is still out there somewhere. All right, so let's dive into this perspective, and I did take a different approach tonight. I was giving a lot of my thoughts throughout the episode. Let me know if you guys like that or not. I always like to switch it up, keep it fresh, but that's just kind of what I felt was organic tonight. However, I want to go over what I think is the most likely scenario of what happened, and it's speculative, but it's based on the evidence we do have. So I believe more than likely the person responsible for this was in the train track area or was in that neighborhood and had been there for a few days, maybe a few weeks, and had seen how easy they could get into the house because there was only this one woman who was there alone, and they could get in this little side road there that was kind of tucked away, and they could get out through the gate and down through the tracks where nobody would see them. So the intent behind it could have been one thing, or it could have been multiple things. They could have planned on going in there, binding her up, robbing her, and then leaving her behind, hoping that she would not reveal who they are. Maybe their face was covered. We don't know. Or it could have been originally a robbery, and then what happened is she fought back, or people arrived and this offender realized that if they left her behind alive, that she would be able to implicate them. Maybe she did know who they were, and at that point they decided to kill her. So what I believe is she's in the house. She's there around 8:25, 8:30. This person shows up at the front door. Maybe they knock, maybe they just walk inside, but if they knock, she looks out, she sees them, they look like a normal person, she's not thinking much of it. She maybe only opens the door a couple inches, but unfortunately that's enough for them to barge their way inside. They get control of her, they're already in possession of a knife, so therefore they have her basically doing what they want her to do at just by verbal command. There was probably a brief struggle once the intruder made their way inside. I'm sure Donna put up a fight based on what people said, and she may have even been injured during that struggle because, as we know, the landscaper saw a couple drops of blood on the stairs. So at one point, the intruder gains control. They pull out the knife, and now Donna's being cooperative. She was probably ordered to put the dogs in an area where they wouldn't be roaming the house. And then they go upstairs, and more than likely, she was either subdued or because this person was in possession of a knife. And at that point, Donna is thinking, I just need to do whatever I can to maybe survive this encounter. She puts her hands behind her back. The intruder ties her up and lays her on the floor. Now, he may have killed her right there, or he could have tied her up and started rummaging through the property, putting things in his pockets. Maybe he was planning on just robbing her and leaving. But he was there a while. And so this happened over a period of time. And as they're inside this apartment and they're going through her property, maybe they're going to sexually assault her after that. Maybe they were just building up to it. And fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, Morgan and Virginia show up at the house and they're trying to gain entry. And now this intruder, who may have already killed Donna by this point, is realizing that they have to go to plan B. This was unexpected. They have people outside the property. They're probably assuming that law enforcement is going to be right behind them. So they're looking for points of egress. They're looking out the windows. They're looking down the door to see if anyone's coming inside. Once they realize that they're unable to gain entry because the intruder or Donna by force put the little chain lock over the door before heading upstairs, they know they got a little bit of time. So as soon as they hear Virginia and Morgan go next door, that's when they make their escape. And they probably left a lot of items behind that they originally intended on taking. Now, as far as the killing of Donna, that could have been done almost immediately before Morgan and Virginia ever arrived, or it could have been done right before the offender fled. Again, I'm trying to get into the mind of someone that I have not seen or spoke to. We have no clue what their background is like, but they could have been rummaging through the place with the intent on sexually assaulting her and killing her before they left. But once they realized that someone was at the property, they had to skip the sexual assault, grab what they could, and kill her because they couldn't leave a witness behind. And stabbing her 13 times, on one hand, you could say it was a crime of passion where there was some emotion behind that stabbing. On the other hand, you could say they wanted to ensure that they killed her and they stabbed her multiple times to make sure that they accomplished what they were trying to do by making sure they hit vital organs before leaving. And 13 times could be done in a matter of seconds. So I'm not going to sit here and visually show you what it would look like, but standing over her, stabbing her quickly, and then fleeing would have happened in a matter of seconds if that's what went down. Now, as far as familiarity is concerned, as I said in the episode, this person may have known of Donna and her property, but it doesn't mean they knew her personally. They could have just known her whereabouts, her scheduling, when she came home, after dropping off the kids, who was normally with her, when the husband left for work in the morning. And this could have been done deliberately because they were casing the joint, or it could have been that this person worked in the area or lived in the area and just happened to see the property and the people that lived there multiple times and realized that there was a window during the day where they could get into that house where nobody would be home or only one or two people would be home that they could overpower. I would even go out on a limb and say there's a strong possibility that they might have approached the door, hand checking it, hoping that no one was home. And unfortunately, Donna was. And so they went inside and they decided to move forward with it. The only reason I would push back against that is if we know for certain that the offender brought the knife and the tape with them, that means they planned on encountering at least one person. And in order to know that someone was going to be there, that means they had some intelligence that they had gathered prior to going to the property. So who would I be looking at in this case? Well, you got to look at everyone because everyone's a suspect at this point. But if you want to try to narrow down the pool, I would be looking at transients in the area that were frequenting the railroad tracks. I'm sure there were many interviews conducted at the time. At least I hope there were. Anybody who was living down there, I'd go back and look at those reports, and I'd go back and pull their case files to see the crimes they committed beforehand and the crimes they've committed since. Are there any similar MOs in there? If there are, we need to go speak to those people again. I would also look at construction companies, landscaping companies, painting companies, any type of maintenance or construction worker that would have had a reason to be working in the area at that time for more than just that day, maybe that last week, and who happened to be working in the area that day. Again, that's going to be tough to do now, 20 years later, but if good report taking and investigating was done at the time, you can go back and look at those reports, which brings me to my next point. What do we do from here? We need to start from square one. It's been 24 years. We haven't had any movement that we know of. We need to start from the beginning. You need a fresh set of eyes, a new perspective, maybe some fresh detectives on it who can go through and start from the beginning and criticize the case. Look at the holes in it. See what could have been done different. Maybe have a different approach to it without being influenced by anybody who's worked the case in the past. Review all the reports, review all the interviews, do whatever work you can do to answer those questions, and then go back and re-interview everyone you can. Richard, family members, friends, neighbors, transients, painters, construction workers, anybody who was talked to then, go talk to them again and see if they give a similar story. I'd also look at any reports for pawn shops that were in the area at the time. I'd see if anything was brought in that was similar. I'd see if there was anybody in the area who tried to sell something that looked like belongings that were taken from Donna's house at the time. If there had been anything, we need to go back and reverse engineer that to see if the person did sell it. And if they did, where did that jewelry end up? Was it melted? Was it sold to someone else? A lot of the times when stuff like that comes in that has value, pawn shop owners, if they're doing things the right way, will take an ID. Maybe that's already been done. If it has, good on you. But there's also a possibility it hasn't. And if it hasn't, you can still go back, and if the pawn shops have good records, I don't know if they're going to have 20 years back, but maybe, just maybe, they still have that as a CYA. And if they do, you go back and review those records, and maybe you find something that was missed the first time. And lastly, it's about public attention. There may be someone out there right now who knows something, but we just haven't reached them yet. So we have to keep it in the news cycle. We have to cover it on podcast. We have to talk about it on YouTube channels. We have to have the media bring it up every year or so. And law enforcement, they have to make sure that these photos of the replica jewelry or anything else that may be of value to the community to look into, they need to make sure it's reaching the right people. Because frankly, I hadn't heard about this case until we started researching it. So we need to do a better job because this is a violent offender who's out there and may have other victims. And speaking of which, we also have to look into crimes that occurred before Donna's murder and also after. Are there any similar patterns, any similar MOs? Was someone ever arrested for those crimes? And if they were, have we spoke to them yet as investigators? If we haven't, we need to. We need to go see them because it's not likely, but if they're in prison for life, they may be willing to share information about Donna's case for some type of deal. It doesn't have to be them getting out early. It could be something in commissary or a year taken off their 100-year sentence. Something. You never know. You have nothing to lose, everything to gain. But if you see a pattern with other victims similar to Donna and they have someone pegged for those crimes, you need to look into that person as well and see if they were in the area of Donna's residence at the time of her murder. Again, it's a lot of work, but somebody's got to do it. And maybe someone you know out there can help. And I want to make sure that you guys have all the accurate information. So just to recap, Donna O'Steen was found murdered in her home in the Ballard neighborhood of Seattle on the morning of November 8th, 2001. She had been bound with duct tape and stabbed multiple times. There were signs of a ransacked bedroom, but only a few seemingly random items were taken. Despite sketches of two persons of interest and ongoing efforts by her family, Donna's killer has never been identified. Anyone with information about Donna's murder is asked to contact the Seattle Police Department tip line at 206-233-5000. And my final words, as always, go out to Donna's friends and family, specifically Richard, her son Kaylin, and her daughter Morgan. My heart goes out to you guys. I can't imagine what you're going through, being at that young age, being in your teens, and finding this out about your mother, especially Morgan showing up at the house like this. And every week I struggle to find the proper words to say because there's nothing that I'm going to say that's going to make it all right. All I can tell you is I'm here with you. If there's anything I can do to help that's more than this, I'm in. And I'm committed until we get you guys the answers you deserve. And I've seen the response from my audience, and I know that they're with you as well. And it would give me great pleasure to sit here in the coming weeks or coming months or however long it takes to get the answers you deserve, to figure out who this scumbag is, and to sit here and tell them that he's been captured and he's going to answer for what he did to your mom. And we just got to keep fighting. We got to keep spreading the message. We got to keep her name alive and ensure that if there's one person out there who can help solve this case, we get to them. And we just have to do it as soon as possible because it's already been too long. I hope I get the opportunity one day to share with all of you that we have some answers in this case. But as of right now, we have to keep working, and we're going to be back next week with another case because unfortunately, we're never going to run out of stories like this that need to be told. So until next week, everyone stay safe out there, and I'll see you soon.